guide your journey into Cabernet Sauvignon magnificence.
Holly hanging across the door, neighbors singing tales of yore. It's so close, hardly can wait. Waking up on Christmas, children dreaming.
Hello, welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine and welcome to Christmas. The festive season is upon us and that means, amongst other things, plenty of wine shopping to be done, whether it's wine as gifts or wine to get you through what can be a slightly taxing time of the year, especially if you're full of family and noise and children running around everywhere. You do want some good wine to keep you company. And so this week we're going to point out some of that wine, but also give you a few hints as to what you should be doing wine-wise over the Christmas period. Later on in the show, we'll sit down with Wikus Human, the former South African sommelier of the year out at Marble, and give his thoughts on the best wine to have ready for this Christmas season. In just a moment, we will be off to the Old Oak at Royal Johannesburg, where Chef Ransley Pietersen picks some great meals for Christmas and gives you the wine to go with them. But before we do either of that, I am in Pick n Pay doing some shopping, and the first thing I'm looking at is some bubbles and the selection that I'm getting ready for Christmas. Now, my mum gave me a brilliant tip when we were kids. I didn't realise how good it was until I got a little older myself, and that was to go shopping for plenty of bubbles, because you need them on Christmas morning when your kids have kicked you out of bed at 5:30 and you're sitting there bleary-eyed as they open stockings and open gifts. You need a little fortitude. Nothing does the job quite like early morning bubbles. So what's on offer? What are your options? Well, you've got a whole range of great South African Cup Classique, and South African Cup Classique is just getting better and better and better. There are your regular go-tos, people like Graham Beck and Peter Ferreira, who wrote the book on South African bubbles, South African Cup Classique. Boschendal making some really nice bubbles as well at the moment, and a range, both them and a number of others, doing stuff that's got a bit of demi-sec to it, slightly sweeter, as well as your slightly drier styles, depending on what you want. And even if you're someone who doesn't normally like the sweeter style, you can often find that when with food, it does bring out a little something extra in a savoury dish. There are also some of the smaller houses, people like Lelude in Franschhoek, are making an exquisite range of Cup Classique at the moment, and that sits amongst a large range of South African options. But maybe you want to balance it out and go with some French as well. Laurent Perrier is in plenty of stock. The other one, though, that I'd look out for, Haslinger et Fils, Haslinger and Sons, out of Epernay, a bottle of French champagne at under 500 rand a bottle. Now that is a pretty good deal, and possibly a great one for a Christmas gift as well. What about your whites and your reds? Well, I'll come to those a little later. Right now, let's head over to Royal Johannesburg in Kensington, where Chef Ransley Pietersen awaits to give me some advice on what to cook this Christmas, and more importantly, what wine to have it with.
Someone to love so I can hold their hand while we're ice skating around the tree in Central Park. Kiss them under the mistletoe. Oh, I want a Christmas kind of spark. Santa Claus.
It's beginning to feel a lot like Christmas. Especially if you happen to be here at the Old Oak, which is where I find myself on a regular basis, because Chef Ransley is quite simply one of my favourite chefs. He's got a rather nice wine list and some splendid food, and it makes for a destination that I and my family love coming to. But I haven't come here today to eat, at least not quite yet. I'll certainly be doing that once filming has started. Instead, I wanted to sit down with Ransley and put a very important question to him. As one of the most exciting young chefs in South Africa, what should I be doing this Christmas to get the feeding of my family just right? And what wine should I be picking to help me in that particular journey? Ransley, welcome. Lovely to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Dan. Always a pleasure being with you.
Tell me about Christmas for Ransley's family growing up. Was it a big part of life growing up?
Family and spending time with family is super important for me, as like working in the industry, you spend a lot of time away from home, and for the past, call it the bulk of 10 years, has been always spent away from my family during the festive season. over the past 2-3 years. Obviously, climbing the ladder in kitchens and having a higher position, I've had the opportunity of being at home with my family, so it's pretty much new to me. But growing up over the years, it's where we build most of our memories, and I think it is for most people. Building memories over Christmas is all about the festive time, and I think sometimes it's often overlooked of what people eat over Christmas. And for me, obviously being a chef, that's the first thing we start discussing in September, October of, guys, what's the menu for Christmas? So super excited. For the first time ever, I will be cooking for Christmas with my family. Obviously, the menu is often the same, but obviously giving it a little bit of a twist. Every recipe, any chef can follow, but your touch is always something special. It's unique. It's something different that you put together, and we will be doing the firm favorites. So your normal gammons, turkeys, roasted chickens, roasted leg of lamb. We have a lot of meat during Christmas. And your side dishes, as I explained to you before, our side dishes are made of smaller protein dishes to accompany the main protein dishes. So I love pasta. I love working with pasta, eating pasta. It's such a comforting kind of meal. And I'm going to be doing a proper carbonara this Christmas with my family, with guanciale, and really focusing on getting the right ingredients and bringing different flair to what has been the norm in my family for years now.
So that's a slightly different spin on the more traditional Christmas menu, and that is no surprise because you're a chef who loves to have fun and you've got a very adventurous soul to the way you approach cooking. For many people, it's going to be a slightly more traditional approach. It's what people are expecting and it's what they've done for years and years, but having done it for years and years doesn't necessarily mean they do it well. And so people, it's quite a lot of pressure when it comes to Christmas, preparing those dishes. Is there, broadly speaking, a secret to getting the gammon right, to getting the turkey right, to ensuring that cooking for maybe 15-20 people, which for most is a lot of people to cook for, that if not getting it dazzling, you at least don't get it too badly wrong?
So I've learned this from my mum's mistakes when it comes to cooking for...
I hope she's not watching this.
I know she's going to be watching. But when you're prepping for Christmas and a large number of people, the stuff that can be done before, take the time and get it done beforehand and focus your energy on what you're doing at that time. For instance, like your gammons, get them boiled off the day before. Glaze them in the oven, glaze them and let them rest in the fridge overnight. Form a lovely skin. It takes the glazing process to half the time of what you would normally do it if you had just taken it out of the pot and put it on a roasting tray or whatever the case may be. Your turkeys, get them done before. I find with turkey, especially because of the nature of the ingredient, what you have is, if that turkey sits kind of like a curry overnight, it is exceptional when it comes to the way it eats, and especially when you get to the red meat kind of side of the darker meat, obviously. So around the thigh, the drumstick, that kind of stuff, as that sits and cools down, you find that the juices disperse a little bit more. And then focus on your sides on Christmas Day, because that's a maximum of 1.5-2 hours for home cooks, and you often leave too much to the last minute, where you end up cooking and entertaining people without spending time with them. So I think planning your prepping is super important for Christmas to spend time with the people that are most important to you.
All right, well, that's the food side of it, and that's a lovely introductory guide. And then there's the wine part. I'm going to pour this while you tell me, first of all, from all of the wine you have here at the Old Oak, you've decided that a bottle of Semillon is what we should be having a glass of, both because I assume it's rather nice in itself for us now on a Friday afternoon, but also because it speaks to the festive menu. Why Semillon? Why this bottle?
Semillon, Wikus Human, who's designed or made up this wine, his winemaking style lends to more of your festive menu, in that, you know, it does well with pork, it does well with red meat. It's not too powerful. It can be enjoyed on its own, and obviously with your gammons and stuff like that. A lot of people do. So David Higgs doing a lovely berry pickle that he's busy marinating in his fridge over the next couple of weeks. That will be ready for his turkey. But I suppose that this wine lends quite well to the fruitier flavors as well, with more of the herbaceous kind of ending when it comes to prepping red meats or white meats.
That's straight away, that's what comes through immediately, that herbaceous finish. We tend often in South Africa to leap straight to fynbos as the catch-all for anything that's vaguely herbaceous. But it's got that somewhere between that that mint and that wild herb.
A little bit of a green peppercorn going in there, not too very powerful, but you know, like I often try to push the ante when it comes to pairing white wine with red meat, and people only know what they know, you know what I mean? So kind of being a little bit more pushy when it comes to stuff like when we do chef's tables, introducing people to pairing white wine with red meat, and changing the perception, because wine is so versatile. No wine is exactly the same. And within the varietals as well, you get a lot of different elements that play on the production of the wine. So just pushing that ante and kind of breaking up that stigma of this is what you drink with this on your plate. So for us, it's all about experience and journey, and where we get to step off the path and find a new route. We love doing that kind of stuff.
And there's a term we use far too often without really thinking about what it means in South Africa, which is a food wine, and it's often spoken of with white wine. And I think it almost emerged from a slightly dismissive space where, well, it's difficult to drink on its own, so I'll have some food to help wash it down, which is both grossly unfair on the wine, but also doesn't even begin to tell you about what that wine is and how it pairs with the food. And you and I have had many conversations about striking that balance so that neither the food nor the wine is overpowering the other. They're working in concert and they're coming together. And with a wine like this, where it's got some texture and it's got some breadth and some depth, something like a turkey it can give life to, because there are few things worse on earth than dry white turkey meat. But similarly, the richness of a gammon, which is by nature more fatty, this is going to cut through it. It's going to give it that counterpoint.
Exactly, and you know, I think it's finding a balance of wines in your cellar that you can select that are very versatile in their nature. Obviously, if you want to have wines in your cellar that you come home and enjoy, you know, while spending time with your family, not so to speak with having it during dinner, I think it's specifically important to identify those wines and keep them in your cellar, because especially now during Christmas time, you have so much, and Dan, I know you have quite a lot, but you have the knowledge and experience to say, listen, this is what we're eating, this I know will work with every single kind of protein or side dish that I'm serving, and I think it's super important that people start developing that kind of knowledge as well.
Well, you are adding to that knowledge and our understanding of it. I think I've got a few ideas to add to both my Christmas menu and my Christmas wine list. Before I do say goodbye and wish you a very happy Christmas, if you have been a good chef this year, and I suspect you have, and Father Christmas is listening carefully, what bottle would you be finding in your stocking on the 25th of December?
Rowan's kind of surprised me. He's kind of hidden a few gems away, but obviously I go through the invoicing, so I pick up things here and there. You know, like learning about wine, I've learned a tremendous amount from Rowan himself, and we always tend to speak about the Chateauneuf de Pape, and it's something that you mentioned on your show. I think it was last week. So in my time spent in Mauritius over the last couple of months, there was a bottle of Chateauneuf de Pape, 1983 or 1973, I can't remember, from my time spent at a special family friend's house, my uncle, and I always dreamed about tasting that wine. So I got back from holiday and I found a case of Chateau Neuf de Pape in our liquor store room that Rowan was hiding away to give me for Christmas. So I'm particularly excited about trying this.
This, of course, is if it is going to you and not to somebody else, which you'll find out on the 25th. Much like that scene from Love Actually when she thinks she's getting the necklace and she isn't. I hope you do get your Chateau Neuf de Pape and there isn't another chef in Rowan's life.
Listen, I hope not.
Happy Christmas. Enjoy that carbonara, which sounds fabulous. Thanks for being a terrific friend to Dan Really Likes Wine through the course of the year. And here's to many more great meals in 2023.
Thank you so much, Dan. Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Merry Christmas from the Old Oak. Of course, if you'd like to get a sense of Ransley's food, the Old Oak is open at Royal Johannesburg. Ransley, formerly of Overture in Stellenbosch with Bertus Besson, not just a great chef, but as you can see, absolutely loves his wine, as of course do I and most of you, I'd imagine. So what about white wines coming up for Christmas? Well, you heard Ransley chat about some of them. There tends to be quite a lot of Sauvignon Blanc drunk in the Nicol household over Christmas. Hot days, we're often out around the pool, around the braai. Although Sauvignon Blanc isn't my most regular of drinks this time of year, there is a reasonable amount. I think there's some great examples, including this one here, which does a couple of things for me. It's a really good price, sitting in my local Pick and Pay at about 135 rand a bottle. Constantia Sauvignon Blanc, it's one of the varietals for which they are celebrated, but also 2019. It's just got a little bit more bottle age on it, and that allows Sauvignon Blanc to settle. Sometimes the really young, really fresh Sauvignon Blanc is just a bit too acidic. It's a bit too sharp and green and sometimes slightly unpalatable. This allows it to ease in and to just be a gentler wine. So that's one I would try if you are looking for something to drink. How about something as your gift? You've got a friend who loves their Sauvignon Blanc, you want to give them a present. Well, another Sauvignon Blanc out of Constantia, but a very different style, is the Métis. It is a collaboration with Pascal Jolivet, one of the famous Sauvignon Blanc makers of France, teaming up with Matthew Day and his team at Klein Constantia for a Sauvignon Blanc that is very distinctive indeed. Of course, you might not like Sauvignon Blanc at all, in which case there are loads of other options. We have quite a bit of Chenin Blanc during the course of Christmas, mainly because I love making turkey. Turkey is one of my favourite things to do at Christmas because I've got a brilliant, although probably terribly unhealthy recipe out of Gordon Ramsay. It involves loads and loads of butter to keep the turkey moist. Dry white turkey is horrible. Moist turkey, loads of butter in it, well, that is glorious. And I find Chenin or Chardonnay just lift that dish and work with it really nicely. If you're going to go the Chardonnay route, there's the Summer Court Chardonnay from Delagrave. Not too much wood, striking that balance between wood and fruit. Alternatively, loads of different Chenin Blanc options. Ken Forrester is always a very solid bet. And then maybe over the course of this summer, go and have a look at something a little different. Try and find possibly a Semillon with a little bit of age on it. Look out for a white blend, something you might not have tried before. Make it a Christmas of experimentation, both for yourself, for your guests, and for people you're buying gifts for. So there's your white wine suggestion. I've got a few red wine thoughts as well, but before I do that, somebody who knows far more about wine than I do. Wikus Human is as fine a sommelier as South Africa has. He shuttles between his various ports of call as the group sommelier at Marble, which takes in Marble itself, Saint and Zoo. So we thought, well, we'll drop in on Marble, we'll catch up with Wikus, and we'll see what he's drinking this Christmas. As we come to the end of 2022 and reflect on some of the highlights of the year, one of my consistent ones has been dropping in here to Marble, David Higgs's Pièce de Résistance, to be followed up by Marble 2.0 down in Cape Town towards the back end of 2023. And the reasons for coming are myriad. There is the splendid food, there is the wonderful aesthetic that Irene and her team have recreated this year, taking an already fabulous space and just lifting it up a notch or two. But the place that defines this restaurant for me is the wine cellar and the evil person who oversees it, because every time I come here for a meal I get this foreboding presence of sommelier of the year Wikus Human, who presents me with a glass of wine, grins manically, and then sets off to the rest of his restaurant, returning a few minutes later to see if I've worked out what he's given me. And it's usually a Uruguayan Viognier or some Malawian blend that nobody could ever guess, but it's part of the delight. The wine list is exceptional, and the people overseeing it led by Wikus even more so, which makes Wikus, as we did a year ago, the right person to sit down with as we head into Christmas to get some festive assessment on what should be in the cellar. Wikus, lovely to have you back on the show.
Oh, thanks, Dan. I must say I'm glad we towards the end of the year, because I've run out of wines to give you, so hopefully next year I'll have to visit some strange and obscure places to get some new samples for you.
I'm sure you will, and you'll add them to a sprawling cellar and this wonderful wine list that you have. Tell me about the wine list in 2022 here at Marble. What have been people drinking? What's been popular? Have there been any shifts in the last 12 months?
I mean, season's always a great thing, so we see the different seasons of the year, and we saw sort of towards the beginning of the year that Pinot and Cinsault was very much on the trend for red wines, and then later on, sort of middle of the year, all of a sudden Cabs, Syrahs, and kind of your Bordeaux blends in South Africa really sort of took a notch up. People wanted a bit more full-bodied style of wine. On the white side, I must say that Chenin Blanc has been trending straight through the whole year, and then yet towards kind of middle of the year, Chardonnay started to make a comeback, but we're talking about Chardonnays that are slightly less oaked. Some people do prefer that slightly more barrel fermented style, but it is that more Burgundian kind of style of Chardonnay that people are looking for.
And what about your own palate this year? So much wine crosses it. In and amongst all of the many, many bottles you've opened and tasted, anything particular that's really surprised you or put a smile on your face?
Something that really sort of was my highlight wine of the year was we managed to sell a bottle of Latour here at Marble in 1994 that's been in the cellar since day one, and I had the opportunity to taste that. And I know it's French, but it was absolutely amazing how good the wine was. I mean, it's stored here at Marble for 6 years, and I was always worried about, like, it's a wine cellar, there's quite a LED lighting and so on, but the bottle was in absolutely great condition. And I mean, there's a few other wines I could talk about, but I mean, I taste so much wine on a day I don't really have my vocabulary unless I have my notes in front of me.
All right, well, tasting all that wine puts you in a great position to lead us into the festive season. We did this a year ago. It was a very popular show where people, brilliant, this is what I can do for Christmas. And it's both an idea of wines in themselves, but also a style and interpretation of wine that might work over this festive season. Starting with what we have in our glasses beside us, because bubbles at Christmas, we often think of bubbles as being celebratory. There's far more to them than that. I think we've seen a lot of food and bubble pairing in South Africa this year, but at a time when we're hoping to be celebrating, bubbles is the automatic choice. What have you got here, and what does that say about South African bubbles this year?
I mean, I think I've just gone back to my old trusty Coleman Brut Reserve, the non-vintage. It's the light blue label. I think JP and Paul are doing a phenomenal job at Coleman. It's a Chardonnay Pinot Noir blend, has some time on the lease, but the nice thing about Bubbly is in MCC in South Africa is that the quality of MCC for me in 2022 has really taken up a notch. It's not just people doing minimum lease contact. People are looking at either blends, some people are adding some barrel fermented reserve wine to it as well, you know, taking on that kind of Krug style, which is great. And the thing about vintage champagne has also been, I mean, a phenomenal kind of thing that came up in 2022. We saw some Demisec 2014s coming out from Amari, which was quite interesting. People holding back kind of stuff for longer time on the lease, doing that kind of RD kind of vibe. But yeah, I must say, Bubbly is for me such a versatile wine, especially when it comes to Christmas as well. Everyone just thinks as a nice kind of aperitif to the beginning of the meal, but I was actually writing an article a few weeks ago, and I realized that turkey and Bubbly also goes so well together. I mean, once you start cooking that kind of crispy skin in the oven, and this kind of beautiful richness and effervescence the bubbles has, it just cuts through that beautiful kind of crispy, oily skin that you have on the turkey.
Also, I'd imagine if you get your turkey wrong, and sadly there are many people who do, it gives you the opportunity to lift some of that drier white meat and inject a bit of life back into it.
It definitely adds to the kind of sort of complex flavors that turkey can bring to the table. Many people have different fillings in turkey, and then some people also cook turkey differently. Some people drop it in a whole bunch of oil, some people roast it in the oven. So there's all kind of different cooking techniques that goes towards turkey. But I mean, it's so versatile, as we said. Me and Higgs usually have a ribeye and Bubbly together because it's so versatile. But yeah, definitely.
Quick question on it. I, on Christmas morning, tend to pull a bottle out of the fridge at about 5:30, because that's when the kids have kicked me out of bed because they want to undo their stockings and unwrap presents, and they're full of excitement. I'm full of a desire to still be sleeping. Temperature, should it be ice cold, or do we want it a little bit warmer than that?
For me, bubbles shouldn't be ice cold. I think it hides a lot of the aromas and nuances that the MCC has. I recommend it slightly warmer, so So maybe once you've woken up, or the first child has tapped you, or first cat has hit you through the face, maybe get up, take it out of the fridge, wake your wife, of course, don't forget that, and then about 20 minutes later, once out of the fridge, open it up just about 2-3 degrees warmer, just to let that nuances just sort of lift a little bit more in the bubbly.
I love the way you just casually threw in wake your wife. Vickers, of course, getting married this year, which was by some distance the highlight of the year as we're on camera. All right, so the versatility coupled with the sense of celebration of bubbles makes it a no-brainer on the Coleman. It's just consistently delivered. And I think Paul Gerber's decision to quit being a maths teacher and decide to make wine instead continues to pay off richly. So we've got one ticked off. Let's move over to some white wine and see what comes up there. Cheers. So on to white wine, probably the space I'm most interested in hearing about from you. You touched on some of the Chardonnay earlier and the slightly lighter, less imposing Burgundian style that we're seeing. What about beyond that? Because I find I've drunk a lot of white blends this year, a lot of really quirky and interesting stuff that's throwing in some Roussanne here or some Viognier there, and winemakers are clearly having a lot of fun with what they're doing. But I also know that I get exposed to and drink a lot of wine that's not terribly mainstream. How experimental, how open are people in general, do you find? How open are they being to different styles of white wine?
I not really want to talk about COVID, but COVID's opened quite a lot of doors and opens people's minds to kind of wine, especially on the white wine and red wine side. I don't know who was selling what during COVID, but do you feel that people are going to more obscure varietals? People are interested in South African Riesling all of a sudden, asking, is it sweet, is it dry? People are interested in these aromatic varietals like Grenache Blanc. We see Viognier, as you said, we see these beautiful kind of Roussanne blends, and we see that often on the floor happening, that people are much more kind of open up to a suggestion of not only a Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Blanc or Chardonnay, but tending to go for these bit more aromatic varietals.
Which leads into what we're preparing to drink with Christmas. The turkey and champagne, or Cup Classique, has already been mentioned. Broadly, I think a lot of dishes fall into either that kind of white meat turkey chicken space or something like a gammon that's richer and fattier. Is it possible to cover both bases with the same wine?
Yeah, definitely. The wine that I did select for Christmas is something with a bit more richness. So I did go for an oak barrel fermented Chardonnay. What that gives you on the palate is it gives you a bit more viscosity on the palate. It gives it a slight more creamier feeling on the palate, because as we say, we are working with gammon. It's got a bit more fattiness. We're working with roasts. We're working with beef tongue that has that beautiful kind of naturally oiliness that gives it you on the palate. I know we do like a carrot ring. I spoke to my wife this morning in the car about the carrot ring. She didn't know what it was, or a cucumber ring, something that's set with cream and a little bit of sugar and lemon juice, but also a bit more richer for Christmas usually. So something like a Chardonnay would work definitely with that. With the turkey as well, you've got that beautiful kind of crispy skin just to layer up with that fattiness in the gammon, always sort of quite a creamy in your mouth and quite layering as well. So this is a wine from Grotepost. It's called the Kapokberg. With the weather we're currently having, we might actually see some snow this Christmas. So not a bad wine to call. So Kapokberg, basically the kind of snow peaks in Grotepost, and then the area is in Darling, so quite close to the proximity to the ocean, so you almost get that also kind of nice saline salty character on the wine, and that usually works like kind of gammon. It's always a bit more salted if you rub it on the outside just to crisp up the skin. So phenomenal kind of wooded style of Chardonnay for me. Once again, temperature here, take this out maybe when everyone's arrived, let it warm up a little bit on the table, because once again with Chardonnay, you don't want to drink it ice cold like Sauvignon Blanc or Chenin Blanc. You want to warm it up a little bit in the glass, because once again, all those beautiful kind of nuances and aromatics lift within the wine.
Right then, on to the red wine, and it's a similar challenge you have with white, I suppose, in that the sheer scale of the variety, and not just the variety, but the interpretation of the varieties that we have, makes the life of a sommelier somewhat difficult when someone says, "I'd just like a nice glass of red wine, please."
Yeah, very, very difficult. I mean, what we see in South Africa, especially at Marble as well, it's got so many older vintages as well, and I mean, there's so many different profiles of red today where you actually get Cabernets that soft and sour. Some winemakers, for example, Craven makes a soft cab, then you get something a bit more medium body, and then you get that old kind of traditional full-bodied styles of cab. But yeah, it gets very, very difficult in the sort of nice, easy glass of red. You got to now actually ask the questions: soft, medium, full-bodied. Would you like a bit of spice on it, a bit more elegance? So very tricky question these days. we managed to get it right here at Marble. We do have very good wine by the glass selection, so very fortunate.
All right, well, what have we got here, and why does this suggest I should be having it ready for Christmas?
So yeah, for Christmas, I mean, there's always kind of a roast lamb in the oven, or people do a nice beef that's been sort of grilled in the oven as well. Some people might braai and do a piece of beef on the fire. So I mean, it's quite difficult to choose red wine for Christmas because all the variables that you have on the table. But I've went for something a bit more full-bodied. We went for the 2016 Cabernet Sauvignon from Boekenhuis the Stellenbosch Vineyard. 2016, a bit more of a rounder vintage, not as full-bodied as 15 and 17. So wine is slightly bit more sort of early accessible in its time. And yeah, with the beef, with the lamb always has a lot of kind of spices that goes with it and seasoning. So that's also one thing I noticed, especially when you're doing your Christmas. Always be careful with what kind of seasoning you put on the lamb. Don't go too spicy, rather stick to something like rosemary, keep it a bit more kind of savory in a sense if you want to do a nice kind of red wine and not sort of muck around too much with the flavors of the red wine.
I asked you earlier about temperature of white wine. What about temperature of red wine? Are we still guilty in South Africa of often serving it just a little bit too warm?
Definitely. I think, I mean, my cellar at home is not air cooled, but I do have a little wine fridge. So if I do plan on putting something on the red wine on the table, I always just put it in the wine fridge. But for me, kind of the sweet spot lies between 15 and 18 for me. Some people prefer it a little bit more warmer, but I'm more on the 15 kind of edge. I like a little bit of sort of a cooler temperature, the kind of European room temperature, as we would call it. Yeah, I just think it sort of just doesn't make the wine a bit more sort of alcohol burn. You know, we've got a big problem. It's not a big problem, but unfortunately we live in a warm Mediterranean climate area in South Africa, so alcohols tend to be a little bit more higher. And then what that sort of slightly cooler temperature does, it just calms down that alcohol a little bit in the wine, and you get more of that kind of fruit and texture and kind of earthiness in the wine that you are looking for.
And in this case, you get an introduction to a vintage that certainly hasn't been ignored, but it does tend to sit in the shadow somewhat of the 15 and 17 vintages either side, which were such rock stars for red in particular.
Definitely. I mean, for me, this is something we can hold for like 2 or 3 years, maybe even longer if you want to, but it's actually a wine that if you smash it in the decanter and have it straight away, it's in such a beautiful space already that it's just drink me now, basically.
Which is exactly what we're doing, and possibly be doing again over the course of Christmas, which leads to my final question, Mr. Human. You mentioned some 94 Latour, probably out of the reach of most, but if you wanted to create a really special Christmas gift, what would you most like to get wine-wise at the moment in South Africa, which might encourage people to go and look at something similar for themselves?
For me, it's always kind of difficult. I get this question quite a lot. What's your favorite wine in South Africa? And I always say to them, if you ask that to one of the best sommeliers in South Africa, any answer I give is probably not going to be biased. But I mean, you basically hit the nail straight on the head. I'm someone that prefers older white wine. Even if it's older Sauvignon Blanc, older Chenin, older Chardonnay. It just sort of, white wine evolves so beautifully in the bottle, and there's not many people that's actually had an older white. Everyone drinks 2023 Sauvignon Blanc, which should be out next week. And people don't just give time, white wine's got of justice, and give it time in the bottle. Flavors just start to develop. You get that beautiful kind of secondary and tertiary kind of flavors on white wine. Same with reds. Reds we all want to put away for 10, 15 years and drink it down the line, but with whites, do it justice. And if you can find an older white somewhere in a liquor shop, always ask if there's not some older stock that they've forgotten in the back, and that's always some of the gems you pick up. So older whites is definitely the way to go for me.
All right, well, I'll endorse that. Some of the best wine I've had this year has been slightly older white wine. If you've got some, it might be a treat for you for Christmas. If you don't, look out for it for yourself or another wine lover amongst your family or circle of acquaintance. But in the meantime, you've got a great recommendation on some bubbles, and not just to drink, but to pair with some food as well. A lovely Chardonnay to do justice to your white meat or something a little fattier, and a great choice of red out of Boekenhuis Kloof. But I think the real message this Christmas is not dissimilar to the one last Christmas. Go out, explore, have fun, and celebrate the fact that South Africa's got great wine and some great wine people as well. Cheers. Well, some expert advice there from Wikus to put into play as your Christmas unfolds. We've talked about some bubbles, we've talked about some whites. How about a little red wine? Well, again, there is a whole pile to choose from, whether it is just drinking at home over Christmas or you're looking for a particularly special gift. From the stuff to just generally drink, 2 editions from the Kapsucht range, the Raymond's Red, which celebrates the great Raymond Ackerman, and the Kaleidoscope, both lovely, easygoing red blends that aren't too expensive and they'll sit very happily around a festive table, especially if you've got loads of people. You want a wine that's not too expensive but still delivers something that's going to keep everybody happy, and Dani Stekler at Kapsucht is a master of doing exactly that. Slightly higher up on the price point, I've really been enjoying the Nicholas out of Boschendal. Some great red wine making going on at Boschendal at the moment, and that Nicholas has won a few awards of late, and again, under 200 rand for a fairly premium red wine. I think that's a nice one to look at as an option over the course of the Christmas months. If you're looking for something a little lighter perhaps, because it is a warmer time of the year, there's a great Pinot Noir selection up for grabs at Pick n Pay. In particular, I think Paul Kluver's Estate Pinot Noir is drinking really nicely. If you're feeling a little more flush, there's some super stuff from Hamilton Russell as well, amongst others. And in terms of Christmas gifts, well, a bottle of Milas Rubicon is never a bad plan. I really like the Thelema 2018 Cabernet Sauvignon. It's a rich, strong, bold, powerful Stellenbosch Cabernet Sauvignon from a stretch of Stellenbosch that I think is making absolutely exceptional Cabernet Sauvignon at the moment. But from there, well, you can spend hours browsing the aisles of Pick n Pay, and that's probably what I'm going to be doing for the next little while. Remember that if you are a member of the Pick n Pay Wine Club, you get so many bonuses, and as you're doing all of your wine shopping this Christmas, there are a whole pile of extra smart shopper points, super deals, and really, really good offers to be taken advantage of. It all adds up to a really good Christmas. Have a wonderful one. Thanks for watching Dan Really Likes Wine during the course of 2022. We'll have one more show before the year wraps up with a few suggestions for New Year. And until then, we'll see you in 2023. Goodbye.